So this week, the Packers will be heading to Seattle on Sunday Night Football to take on the Seattle Seahawks. And right now, the Packers have 4 games left this season, currently sitting at 9-4. They have a very good chance to make the playoffs. Even if they lose 3 of the 4 games, they still have about a 75 to 80% chance to make the playoffs. But this should be a really fun matchup, a really good matchup. I think it could be a close game, potentially in Seattle. And it is interesting to note that if the playoffs were to start today, this would be the playoff matchup, Packers-Seahawks. The Seahawks currently, as it stands in the NFC, are the 3rd seed. The Packers currently are the 6th seed, so this would be the playoff matchup. So there's a chance that we see this matchup once again in the playoffs, so that's something to keep an eye on. And if we look at the Seahawks season, they went through a really rough stretch middle of the season, losing 5 of 6 games. In the past 4 games, however, the Seahawks have won 4 straight. So they lost 5 of 6, and then now they've won 4 straight. And when we look at these games, they weren't necessarily against top-tier teams, basically. They played the Cardinals twice in this stretch. Cardinals, they're okay. They're just not a great team. I think they're 6-7 right now. They beat the Cardinals this past week 30-18, so put up 30 points. And then 2 weeks before that, they beat the Cardinals 16-6. And then they beat the Jets 26-21. We all know the Jets have not lived up to what I think most people, including myself, thought they would be before the season. They have been atrocious. And then they also played the 49ers and beat them 20-17. So they have had a really nice stretch of games, and they are currently 1 game behind the Packers when it comes to overall record, 8-5 versus the Packers sitting at 9-4 after losing to the Lions last week. And I think for the Packers last week, we saw that they are in the same level of talent as the Detroit Lions, even though they didn't win the game. But it went down to the wire, and I think we saw just how good the Packers can be. And I don't think the Seahawks are at the same level as Detroit, but they have played a lot better football the past few weeks. They have been the best scoring defense in the past 4 games. As I said, those offenses not great, but still noteworthy that their defense has really started to play at a very, very high level the past few games. And if we look at the Seahawks defense, just their overall statistics this year, they're the 11th best scoring defense, 18th in yards allowed, and 13th in yards per play allowed. And if we look at, their passing defense versus their rushing defense, their rushing defense is definitely their weakness, which I would expect the Packers to really try to take advantage, considering how good the Packers' rushing attack has been, considering how good Josh Jacobs has been this year with the 3rd most rushing yards in the NFL. But the Seahawks rushing defense, 21st in rush yards allowed per game and 25th in rush yards allowed per play. And their passing defense, much better, 10th in passing yards allowed and 8th in passing yards per play allowed. And the great thing about the Packers and their offense is that it's not like they have one area of their offense that's much better than the other. I think statistically, if you look, the rushing offense is slightly better overall just when it comes to per game yards. Currently, the Packers are 5th in rush yards per game, and their offense is 10th in pass yards per game. But 2 strengths. I think the Packers' offense is one of the best in the league. They're the 7th best scoring offense. But when you look at the Seattle's defense, the one area where they have been more weak has been against the run. And considering they're 25th in rush yards per play allowed, I think the Packers should be able to get the running game going. And if we look back to last week against the Detroit Lions, Josh Jacobs didn't have a massive day rushing yards wise, only 66 rushing yards, but he did have 3 rushing touchdowns. And I think a few, if not all, of those were in the red zone. But the one thing we've seen from this Packers offense that has been a very good sight to see, considering what it had looked like earlier in the season, is the red zone offense has finally started playing very, very good football, played very well. The Packers were 4 for 5 in the red zone against the Lions. And so now when we look at the overall stats in the red zone, the Packers are the 12th best red zone offense in the league. And that's just a massive jump from a few weeks ago, because maybe 2 to 4 weeks ago, when I looked at that stat, the Packers were like 27th or 28th in the NFL. So they have been on fire in the red zone the past 3-4 games. And that was the one area where they really needed to see a lot of improvement. If they were to compete with some of these top tier offenses, it still wasn't quite enough against the Detroit Lions because of how good their offense is. But I think when you look at this matchup, Seattle's defense has been very hot. They have a lot of talented players like Leonard Williams on the defensive line. Look at their pass rush, 17th in sacks, 11th pressure percentage. So they've gotten pressure almost at a top 10 rate. Packers offensive line last week against the Lions, it was the most I've seen them struggle early on in the game. Jordan Love, the first half, was getting pressured a ton. The Lions were bringing a ton of blitzes, and it seemed like the offensive line could not, block the Detroit Lions in their pass rush. That led to the Packers only having 7 points in the first half last week. And that's the thing with the Packers offense in some of these games where they've lost, is they've gotten off to really slow starts in the first half. Luckily, Jordan Love is so good. The Packers offense is so good that they have been able to get it really close in the second half, putting up 24 points against the Lions after only 7 points in the first half. But we really need to see this offense get off to some fast starts because it's tough to always come back when you're down. It's good to see the Packers can do it and can get very close every game, but this is a game I want to see the Packers offense get off to a fast start, and this is a somewhat solid defense, I would say, overall, and they've gotten better recently, as I already said. The Seahawks defense, situationally, 11th best red zone off defense, so pretty good. 17th on third down conversions allowed, so basically average in the NFL. And they're tied for 14th in takeaways per game. And for the Packers offense, Jordan Love has played some really clean football the past 3 weeks. Early in the season, until maybe about 4 weeks ago, before he got in this stretch where he hasn't thrown a pick in 3 games, the biggest topic of discussion in the sports media was Jordan Love. He has the talent, he has the ability, but he just can't, fix this interception problem. A lot of people seem to not trust Love because of that, and there's no doubt it was a problem, but it's been very good to see that he has cleaned up those interceptions, hasn't thrown quite as many risky throws, and I think that if he continues to do that, this Packers offense is going to be tough to stop. And so I still think the Packers offense has the edge here. I think, honestly, in most games, the offense has the edge because of Jordan Love's talent, first off, and then the talent of the rest of the offense with Josh Jacobs, one of the best running backs in the league this season, and just the plethora of talent at receiver, Tucker Kraft at tight end. The offensive line, for the most part, has been very good. Their second fewest sacks allowed at 16 overall. Some of that is with Jordan Love's ability to escape pressure. He's very good at that. But this is an offense that, even against some of the best defenses in the NFL, I don't have many concerns when it comes to their ability to put up a lot of points. Now, if the Packers defense does what it did last week against the Lions, which was not much, especially when it comes to stopping the pass and Jared Goff and a lot of throws in the middle of the field, the Packers offense has to be nearly perfect if the defense plays like it did last week. And so now if we sort of move to the other side of the ball, the Packers defense for the most part this season has been good. They're the 9th best scoring defense, 13th in yards allowed, 11th in yards per play allowed. But in 4 games against I found this stat the other day. At the time when I found this stat, maybe a week or so ago, maybe 5 days, something like that, the Packers had played 4 top 10 scoring offenses in the league. 2 of those games were the Lions. One was the Eagles, and I think the other was the Vikings, I'm pretty sure. 3 of those 4 games, the offenses put up 30-plus points on the Packers. So the defense has played better against lower-tier teams. Against some of these best teams, it's been pretty ugly. I do think when you look at the Packers' injury situation, Jair missing multiple games, Javon Bullard leaving the game last week, Evan Williams leaving with a concussion. It hasn't been great in the secondary, and I think getting Jair back, which hopefully will happen this week, will be a big boost for this defense to get your lockdown corner back onto the defense. But I do want to see the Packers defense be able to play better against some of these top-tier teams. Now, is this Seahawks offense a top-tier team? I wouldn't necessarily say so. Overall, they're the 15th best scoring offense in the league, 13th in yards per play. So slightly better than average when you compare them to the rest of the offenses in the NFL. I do think, though, when this offense sort of hits on all cylinders, they have so much talent at receiver with Jackson Smith and Jigba, with Zach Charbonnet last week filling in for Kenneth Walker, running back. I picked him up on my fantasy team. He got me like 38 points. And so I was paying attention last week to sort of rooting him on. I won't be this week. Luckily, I have a playoff bye, so I'm not concerned about that, luckily. But even if Kenneth Walker is injured again, which he might be, he may not play again this week, Zach Charbonnet may be better than Kenneth Walker. And so I think that if this Seahawks offense is really just playing their best football, they can be one of the better offenses in the league. Now, overall, they've been sort of up and down at times, but the past 2 games, they put up 26 against the Jets. They put up 30 against the Cardinals. And so this is an offense that can put up a lot of points. Geno Smith and the Seahawks passing offense have the 3rd most pass yards per game. Geno's been really good when it comes to completion percentage. He's mostly accurate overall, but he does have 14 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, so he will put the ball in harm's way at times. And so this Packers defense has been able to take advantage of that a lot this year, and so I would expect that could happen here. If you look at their offensive line, they have the 9th most sacks allowed, so the offensive line hasn't been that good. 41 sacks allowed. They're 21st in pressure percentage allowed at 37.3%. We all know, though, the Packers pass rush has been a big weakness, probably the biggest weakness of this Packers defense this season is their inability to pressure the quarterback consistently. They're currently, according to NFL Pro, which is where I got a lot of these stats, 29th in pressure percentage. So there's only 3 teams better than them when it comes to getting pressure. Worse than them, not better than them, worse than them. The Packers get pressure at 30.2%. So that has been one of the biggest struggles. And I think that when you have a pass rush not getting pressure, it hurts the secondary because you're not, affecting the quarterback. And the longer a quarterback has back there in the pocket to dissect things, to allow receivers to break open, break free in the secondary, it means more passing yards for the opposing offenses. So I think that's part of the problem with the Packers secondary is the inability to get pressure from the Packers pass rush. I do think Lucas Van Ness has played a little better recently. Rashawn Gary has shown life at times, but overall, Packers pass rush hasn't been very good. And that has led to, as well, the secondary being 21st in pass yards allowed per game, 17th in pass yards per play. And as I said, the Seahawks have a ton of talent offensively. DK Metcalf, still a very good player. Jackson Smith and Jigba has been the best player there, a young receiver. He's played lights out. He's been their leading receiver lots of times this season. And so they have a offense that can get going at times, and I don't think we can necessarily take them lightly. When we look at their rushing overall, they've been pretty bad rushing the ball. I think part of that is because of their offensive line hasn't been great. But overall, 27th in rush yards, 24th in rush yards per play at 4.1. But last week, Zach Charbonnet went off, so I don't think that we can necessarily, think that they're just going to not be able to run the ball. They were able to recently with Zach Charbonnet. But that has been the strength of the Packers defense, is their rushing defense. They're ninth in rush yards allowed per game and 7th in rush yards allowed per play at 4.1. So that's a strength of this Packers defense this year, which has not been for a long time, is their rushing defense. And so to be a top 10 defense, I think the Packers should be able to handle the Seahawks attack if, what we've seen this season and what we saw last week against the Lions continues. Because even the Lions last week, I think they averaged about 3.3 rush yards per play. And it was mainly the passing attack that was what caused most of the problems for the Packers and their defense. But that is a very, very talented Lions offense, the best in the NFL. So I think this should be an interesting matchup for the Packers defense. And I think if the Packers really want to go in a Super Bowl run, they need to be able to play better football in the secondary. I think a lot of that comes down to Jair coming back and hopefully Evan Williams, Javon Bullard coming back soon as well. But I think this should be a really interesting game. It could be a close game. It's in Seattle. That's going to factor into it. That can be a tough place to play. But it should be a very fun matchup. I think the Packers are going to win this game. I think that the Packers offense is so good. I just don't think the Seahawks offense is going to be able to match the Packers offense. And I think we're going to see the Packers bounce back after a tough loss, a close game to the Lions. I think the Packers will come ready to play, and I think they're going to win this one. So I'm going to say Packers win this game 30-23. As I said, this is a good Seahawks offense. Could come down to the wire potentially. But let me know your prediction in the comments down below. If you want more Packers content, you can follow me on Twitter at LukeBeller3. But I appreciate you guys watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time.